Is there, so I think we do have a quorum. We should open with a roll call. So Joanne Zygmunt, Chair, here. And please tell me if I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly. Tanya Babbitt? Tana?
Tana is correct.
Tana.
Here. Babbitt here.
Stephen Drown?
Drown here.
Thank you. Nikki Dostumian?
Dostumian here.
Kelly Perito here. There, thank you. And Chris Lopes.
Here.
Okay. Did I miss anybody? The screen's really tiny, so
No.
that's it. Okay.
And I
great.
just forwarded, Joanne, I just forwarded you the agenda, and if anyone else needs a copy, just raise your hand and I'll send it along.
Okay, super. It hasn't popped through yet. Oh, here it is. Great. And then with us here today from, I'm so sorry, remind me which firm?
BSC Group.
BSC Group. We've got both Heather Gould and Jeff Bagg. And I think that's everybody on here. Great. All right, so review and acceptance of March 5 minutes. Did everybody get them and have a chance to review them? And are there any questions or changes that need to be made? No? Seeing none, does anybody have a motion?
Babbitt moves to accept the minutes of March 5th, 2025.
Great. Do I have a second?
First, second.
Okay. All in favor? Tana?
Aye.
Stephen?
Yes.
Nikki?
Yes.
Kelly?
Yes.
Chris? Chris, I think you're muted.
I'm looking for the notes in the in my history. I don't see them, so
For the
Just
minutes.
yes.
Do you want to vote on the motion? Do you want to abstain, or do you want to take a minute to review them?
I'm gonna abstain for
Okay.
now until I can see the notes, but that shouldn't stop you.
Okay. And then welcome, Sahara. Have you had a chance to review the minutes? We were just doing a motion to accept them. I don't know if you want to vote or abstain at this point.
Yep, I will vote to accept.
Okay. All right. So the minutes are approved. Now we're moving on to the update on the master plan and baseline data and draft action plan. Stephanie, do you want to say anything, or should we jump right in with BSC Group?
I think we'll let BSC jump right in.
All right.
Heather, I think you're prepared to do that.
I am up.
Screen of yours.
All right, I'm going to share and make sure I pick the right screen. So
But I would like to just say one thing. I really appreciate how this group has been willing to stay together while we had the challenge of not being able to meet. So, you know, thank you for that.
So what we sent along was our first draft of the existing conditions report, and looking at the 2014 version, there was a lot of information in there and it was very, very dense. We really tried to streamline a lot of that information and use more kind of tables and graphics than text when we could. So that's the perspective we were coming from. A lot of the information in terms of the demographics we took from that format. You may find that some information may be in a different section than it was originally in the 2014 document, but we also tried to keep the data that we were using consistent. So there are notes about what data was used when, and for more recent data that we've incorporated in here, we've used the American Community Survey 5-year estimates. So the most updated information there is from 2023. That's the year where 2024 hasn't been released yet. So that's why we're looking at 2023. When we're comparing 10 years cycles, you'll see, you know, we go 1990, 2000, 2010, 2020, and then we add the 2023 in just because that's considered the present day information, the most accurate information we have to date. So that is where the sources of data are coming from when we're talking about census data and the statistics that we incorporate within this. Looking at different population changes by age cohorts, we've displayed the information in different ways just to try to make it easier to read and digest. When we look at, you know, comparison tables with the projection populations, this information came from the UMass Donahue Institute. So again, we're sourcing where we've gotten the information from. When we look at the race and ethnic makeup, we have it displayed in a couple of different ways just to show the increase in diversity of the population over time, particularly within the 13 years from 2010 to 2023 in this instance. And then we go into household types. We have some general data about educational attainment, you know, information about the town compared to the county, compared to the state overall. And then we talk about economic development and industry by occupation, and we compare 2010 to 2023. Looking at the differences in how it's increased across the board or decreased between the different classes of workers. And this is also census information. And as said before, census 2010 data was the decennial census information, and the 2023 data is from the American Community Survey 5-year estimates. We go into occupation by class of worker. So whether they're private company workers, local, state, federal government employees, self-employed with their own business, self-employed, but nobody else who's working with them, and then not-for-profit workers. So you can see that there's some interesting kind of increases and decreases in terms of that table. Looking at employment by occupation, this is where it's grouped in certain kind of categories, and it's really hard to separate out whether it's management, business, science, or arts, but they group them all together according to the census data. So that's employment by occupation, and we're comparing the percentage of those workers in Easton to the state overall. So you can see there are some differences in terms of, you know, the employment by occupation, management, business, science, and arts is higher in Easton than it is in the state on average. And then we also have some information about the unemployment rate down at the bottom of this page, page 10, which talks about Easton's unemployment rate as of April 2025, because that is the most updated information on the state's website. The Department of Economic Research posts that information, and it shows in comparison to surrounding neighborhoods, well, communities. However, the unemployment rate in Easton is lower than in Bristol County and in the state overall. So we have a little bit of information here from the censuses on the map application, which shows how many people travel into Easton to work and how many people who live in Easton travel outside of Easton to work and how many who live in Easton work in Easton. So that's what this image depicts. And we've gone in a little bit of detail about the types of employees that are in the town now. And it's a range that we're given from the data sources that we have. So looking at it, the Roach Brothers Supermarket and the Regional Vocational Technical High School employing between 250 and 499 people. And then other notable employers who are listed there.
So I have a question, Heather.
Sure.
Do you have a sense of where the inflow of jobs, people coming to Easton for employment, what sectors that's coming from?
That is a great question.
Or
that
coming to, I should
I will,
say.
I will have to see if I can get an answer for that.
I think that would be useful information.
Mhm.
So would it,
We-
would it be, would
Go
it
ahead.
be, if I'm reading your occupation correctly, would it be in management, business, science, and arts? Because that went up, it looks like that went up the most and the other ones kind of went down or trended on the same. Right there?
Correct. The other ones did decrease. And the management, business, science, and arts occupations was the one that increased. It increased the most, but it's the only one in this table that actually had an increase. I think that's an interesting trend to look at over time. And maybe we can dig a little bit deeper into that to figure that out. But Stephanie, I think we may be able to find some sort of answer looking at the surrounding communities and seeing what their commute times are to their work
Yeah,
and seeing if there's a way to figure out if that's what, you know, like if they're coming from, I don't know, Brockton or, you know, south of Easton, you know, Taunton or wherever.
yeah. And then just to go back to the job type
Mm-hmm.
category. It would be interesting to see, so the trends, especially like in the service occupations. And the reason I'm thinking of that is that one of the things that we heard while we were working very closely with the business community, especially during COVID, but even shortly thereafter, was the difficulty in getting service employees for
Right.
restaurants in particular. Not just because there's a less people coming into that work sector, but also because of housing costs. So
Mhm.
not just within Easton that the housing isn't necessarily affordable for people who are working in the service industry, but even outside of Easton.
Mhm.
And that's kind of an anecdotal coming from folks that run those type of businesses. So it would be interesting to kind of see what the trend is there.
Mhm.
Heather, I'm also wondering, this information is pretty like sort of macro in a sense. Is there any way to get information like more local as to like the number of businesses that have opened or the number that might be, you know, small versus large, the number that have closed, anything like that?
Yeah, so we have we have ARC GIS business analyst. And so we can drill down on that information at a more detailed level. It's not always as accurate as the census data. So the error, like the range in error
The
might be a
margins.
little bit, yeah, the margin might be a little bit greater. But we can certainly look at that and see if there's anything we can pull from running a report for that.
Great, thank you.
Is there any way to look at, I didn't think I saw it in here, but is there any way to look at the number of people that live in Easton and have remote jobs? Like, are we post-COVID starting to attract more residents who are working from home?
Maybe the American Community Survey might have that information. That would be my immediate thought because they do look at how people get to work. Well, so 19% work from home, it looks like on this one. 71% of residents drive to work while others work from home, 19%, carpool 5%, use public transit 2%, walk 2%, or use other means 1%.
Okay.
So
I'm just
we can,
wondering
it may be interesting to see if, we can look at data from 5 years ago and see what the change has been and call that out as a statistic as well.
That's what I'm wondering. Like, I'm wondering if we're seeing an increased population of people who stay local and that might influence their ability to live in the community, to use some of the services in the community because they're not going to be, say, using services that are available near their workplace.
Mhm. Okay. And as we talk, Jeff is writing all this stuff down so that we can make sure we address it moving forward. And if he has anything to add, he can feel free to jump in. So that's what we have for economic information right now. And we can definitely look at what the business analyst has for the town that might be different than the American Community Survey information and see what we can pull from there to incorporate into that section. Then we go into development trends and constraints, and this analysis is really related to the zoning and the special zoning districts. And then it kind of turns into land use. So I don't know how in depth you want to review this section right now, because it is a lot of description. In terms of land uses, I don't think it should come as any surprise that 45.7% of the land uses are residential. And I can make this a little bit bigger for people. And then 38.2% of the land is exempt. So it's municipal or state or nonprofit owned.
I have a question here.
Sure.
On a residential, can you tell which ones are the property owners living on the property versus rental property?
We have, I believe we have statistics about owner occupied versus, so 78% of the housing units in Easton are owner occupied and 22% are renter occupied. We don't have the locations of where they are in town, but that's the statistic that came out of the data that we looked at.
And that's as of 2024, is that correct?
As of 2023.
2023. Oh, 2023. Okay.
And that would include the larger apartment complexes, but also there are a lot of smaller multifamily homes where there are renters in Easton. So those would also contribute to that number. Kind of like the hidden, nobody really knows they're there.
And then you can see in this table that there are, transportation, I'm thinking that's right of ways. So that's usually par for the course in terms of around 5% of land use is actually right of way in a town. Industrial land, it's about 2.5% of the total land uses. Agricultural land, 2.4%. Forested land is very tiny, 0.4%. And then water is 0.5%.
So the exempt land, what does that include? Because it's kind of surprising to see that only 2.4% is forested land.
Oh, okay. So
does the exempt include our permanently protected open space? Like the Hawk Swamp is quite a large swath of land.
I would say,
and that's state owned. That doesn't even take into consideration like Wheaton Farm, Borderland, which
we can. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was going to say like Borderland, even though most of Borderland, as I understand it, is actually in Sharon, but Easton still has portion of that, but, you know, the town holds, a significant, amount of land in open space.
Mhm.
I
I
think-
would say that, go ahead.
I think some of that gets covered in that open space discussion that comes up next.
Okay,
It's sort of that broader overview, and I think it drills down in that next in the next section.
yeah,
Can I
Right, in
just
tax
add?
exempt land.
I think one of the important things is definitions. In my job, I read a lot of master plans, and sometimes one person means something in one master plan, and I read another one, and they actually mean something totally different. So I'm wondering if it would be helpful, you know, even simply in this chart that Stephanie just pointed out, could we define what each of these things mean as like a footnote or some whatever way you think is most suitable? But I think most people, when they look at something residential, hopefully is pretty obvious, but the other ones I think are kind of gray, especially if somebody's not familiar with that terminology.
Sure. So this is, as Jeff said, the breakout of vacant tax exempt land, and who the party is that, you know, owns it. And there is some county land, it looks like. At least that's how it was defined in the assessor's data.
huh, I wonder,
Um,
okay,
And then we have conservation land.
Yeah.
And conservation organizations. So like a land trust. Municipal, tax title. And it looks like educational private.
which is interesting because that would not include Stonehill, which I know to be well over 14 acres.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all tax exempt.
So we'll have to look into that statistic a little bit more now that we're talking about it and figure out.
And
And
Stephanie,
where did that data
I mean,
come
it does
from?
say vacant, so that came from the
Oh, okay.
assessor's data.
Well, but I'd still have to kind of.
where would the railroad track land fall under? Is that vacant, or, I mean, do we call that out, or?
That
And
might
that's
fall
a
under
good question, Chris, because a portion of it
transportation
runs
also.
through the Hockomock Swamp, but it's owned by the MBTA.
Right.
Hmm. I guess we have to do a little more digging on that one too. Go ahead, Stephen.
Where would the borderland play out in this example?
I think we would have to look at those specific parcels that make it up and see how the assessor's data is characterized. That gets into like the very detailed analysis of it, whereas the intent here is to keep it pretty broad brush. But that's something we can look at the assessor's data and see what it says.
Well, it could be broad brush, but it's a substantial amount of acreage. That's why I ask.
Okay.
Can you also, Heather, I mean, what does vacant mean? Does it mean that there's just no building on it?
I believe it means that it's undeveloped land. So yes, there would be no building on it.
Okay. So on the figure 5, the previous land uses chart, it would probably fall under agricultural, forested, water exempt, maybe?
Correct.
Okay.
What we can do is we could map it out and see what it looks like. in terms of it might help us figure out more if it could be characterized wrong. You know, assesses data over time can become something and there's mistakes made and
Oh, so this
whatever.
is coming from the assessor's data. Okay. Hmm.
Yeah, and one thing I was just going to chime in and say is I think what we should probably look at this more closely, but I think what's happening is the assessors have their own set of criteria, which might
Mhm.
not align with what you guys are thinking. Like it might appear differently in the open space and
Mm.
recreation plan. And I think we could maybe take a shot at just kind of sort of corroborating the terminology so that it translates a little bit better. Because I think, like, because it does talk about Chapter 61, but then the open space plan has sort of that inventory of farmland, open space parcels,
That's the-
and all those kind of more specific categories. And maybe we just need to like cross check. You know, we need to be clear that this is assessors records, which are going to be different than the way the open space plan categorizes some of this. So I would imagine it has the railway, right of way, and things like that in the open space plan
Mhm.
data.
I think that would be helpful. The other thing I'm wondering too is I'm thinking, what is the purpose of presenting the information? And, if you look at figure 5, I think, you can look at that figure and then start talking about all the different things that might mean. Like, do we need more commercial and industrial because it's such a small slice of the pie or whatever. But if I look at table 8, I'm not sure how to interpret that on like a reality basis. So I'm wondering if in addition to whatever you guys think, or maybe instead of, it might be better to just talk about land that's still available for development or some other use. So land that's not like conservation restricted or whatever else might be part of this category. I don't know. I'm just thinking of like the usefulness of the information. And right now I'm not sure how you'd make use of it as
Right.
it's presented and what it is.
I think that's a really good point, Joanne. I think what would be more useful, especially right now where there's such a focus on the budget and the constraints of being able to raise revenue because of Prop 2.5 and the fact that so much of our land is exempt. So for example, Stonehill College comprises over 2,000 acres of land. And my understanding is that is all tax exempt. And that makes a big difference on
Mhm.
the town's ability to generate revenue to support the town's services.
And that might be actually a really good thing to include somewhere in here too, is just the percentage of tax exempt property versus taxable, like taxable residential, et cetera.
Yeah, I just think that I think you've hit on it, and it sounds like everybody's on our side is kind of saying the same thing, that that this vacant land doesn't really tell us a lot.
Okay.
Is that vacant land, that equates to the 38.2% in the pie chart, correct?
No, I don't. Exempt is just exempt. The vacant land, well, maybe it does.
And
You can,
and that's what.
well, no, because
Joanne-
you could have land that has buildings on it that the town owns that wouldn't be considered vacant. So I don't think that you can compare figure 5 land uses to table 8 vacant tax exempt land and say this 4,000 acres is 38% of the land in town.
Right.
And that's why I agree with what Joanne said originally. We probably should put some definitions in there.
Mhm.
It's a little confusing, and we're gonna take this to the public, right? We're gonna take this
Correct.
to folks, yeah.
I hear what you're saying. We'll definitely dig into this a little bit deeper and make it much more easier to understand and address questions.
I think a lens to take with all of this is what is the public going to try to understand and interpret from it. And if there's a significant amount of land that cannot be touched, and there's only a small portion of vacant land that we could do more with, then that's important to help them understand.
Mhm.
And then what influence they have, to Stephanie's point on the Stonehill piece, there are places that we have the ability to make decisions to change it. And then there's conservation land and Stonehill land and a number of places that no matter what remain exempt. And if we can simplify that for the public to get, that will go a long way. I don't know if that makes sense, but just the way I sort of frame those buckets is like, there's land that we say we want to keep the green space. Of that, there are pieces that we will not be able to touch at all. The Stonehill land, the conservation land, like there are places, and then there is a fraction of that that we could actually choose to develop if we wish to or not. And helping people sort of understand that funnel is what I think we're all trying to wrestle with.
Right, right. And I think that really ties into what's the story we're trying to tell with these statistics.
And it could also lead to an exercise of looking at what land is zoned what,
Yes.
and whether the zoning would allow for any kind of development there. So we can
Right.
take that further.
Yeah.
We do go into discussion about chapter 61 lands. So that's chapter 61, 61A, and 61B.
Yeah.
Sorry, Stephen, you have your hand up again.
Yeah, along the same line of points that everyone has made, it'd be interesting to see on table 8, what is the total acreage for the town of Easton? That way you can sort of make some sort of reference to the vacant land to the total. I mean, it could be in all those, the text, but I don't know if it's 5% or 10% or 20%. So that would be interesting from my perspective to know.
Okay. I'm sorry, I missed that statistic because I was trying to make sure I was including like the larger number of everything as we went through. So I appreciate that feedback. We just jump right into the land use percentages and don't talk about the total numbers. So we will add that for sure.
And it's a great place to put that information because then people have it, because that's a number that people do call out, but there doesn't seem to be one definitive source for the information.
Okay. Is there any other questions or conversation that folks want to have about the land uses or the table 8 here, or should we keep moving?
Keep moving.
Okay. So this image here, and I think maybe we should include a larger scale one as part of an appendix when we finalize the report, but this figure shows the conversion of farmland from 2001 to 2016. So when we talk about chapter 61 lands, that land is not necessarily protected in perpetuity. There are certain programs that allow for tax breaks for certain land uses. However, those agreements could be 10 years and then they could expire if they're not renewed. And so there's turnover in land in that sense of how the land's being used after, a landowner decides they no longer want to continue with the operation, whether it's agricultural or foresting or the like. So we have a little bit of discussion in here about chapter 61 lands, and we did refer to the open space and recreation plan information for that. That's included in here. Then we look at housing and development, and The housing stock in Easton is primarily single unit structures, 75% of that. Followed by multi-unit buildings, which are 24%, and a small number of mobile homes. Most residents in Easton moved to town between 2010 and 2017. And then we do pull in some information from the housing production plan in 2022. And we have a little bit of a history of housing units that were permitted by building type based on US Census Bureau data. Chris, go ahead.
Just a quick question on jumping back to slide 15. I tried to blow that picture up and I can't read the grid. Is that the intent, or is what's in that grid the same thing to what's to the left of it?
So that just shows the land in red in town is land that had been agricultural land and is now no longer agricultural land. It's been developed.
So can you read? I just
No,
can't read
I
it. I try to make it
that's
bigger,
why
so it's blurred. So
correct. That's why I said I think it would be helpful to include a larger version of that in an appendix with other maps and graphics so that it's
Okay.
easy to refer to see it
so
at a
you're gonna
larger
pull that
scale.
grid out? All right.
Correct. Yep. I think the biggest thing we were trying to get to here was there is some land based on the red, and maybe we can have a sentence about this that describes it. Some land in red that, you know, shows that it's been a loss of agricultural land over time. Then we get into more development and trying to capture development that's happened, you know, past, present, and future. And the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, MAPC, has a mass builds database that tracks development across the state. And so there are projects that are listed for the town, and we have pulled that information into this table. The disclaimer is the information is only as good as the person who input it in. So I think it's still a work in progress as we kind of look through it and digest it, but this was our attempt to try to capture a lot of the development that's happened in town over time. So this hasn't been fully vetted out. I tried to cross-check and cross-reference it as much as possible. And just have a little note in the document itself that just said it will need more vetting. So we know that it's not completely 100% accurate. But we thought it would be helpful to show that there really has been a whole lot of development that has happened over the last 10 years. And we can work to kind of incorporate more of the detailed information about the type, you know, housing types and number of units and all of that into this as well. Go ahead, Chris.
You actually answered my question, because you have Avalon, it says expansion, and then you have Quistit, which says large, and I would think Avalon would be large, but I think you're saying that you'll add the numbers too, so we can see
Correct.
where those big populations are. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
We'll have to work with Stephanie.
I was
and see
just going to suggest that we
Mhm.
we can help you with this.
Great. There's only so much information you can find through web searches. So we
Right,
tried,
right.
but-
And I mean, I'm looking at this and again, this is a good list of a lot of the more significant development in town.
Mhm.
And Stephanie, is there a way to incorporate, because we do have a lot of development going on now, Because this is past, present, and future. Should
I
we,
think,
go ahead.
no, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, because we do have some development that probably wasn't in that consensus, but we know that it's being done. That's a certain size. So should
Well,
we add that as
yeah,
future?
and I'm looking at it, and again, I see a lot of what I would be looking for. So, for example, some of the development that's still in progress is Old Forge Commons, which you have here, the Sawmill Village, Goodspeed Estates, which should be wrapping up. They even have Blackledge. Although that's still kind of on hold. So in the car dealership. So yeah, we'll take a look at this, but I'm actually, I wonder, the one thing it doesn't look like is like redevelopment. I didn't see Shovel Works on there, which was an adaptive reuse of the old shovel mill.
Oh, it's right here.
Oh, there it is. Yeah. So we will take a look at it and see if there's anything. And Chris, if you see something there that you think is missing, by all
Sure.
means, let us know.
Yeah, that would
Sure.
be great. And then we start talking about development constraints. And this is again based on assessor's data. And the assessor's data provides information on what parcels they characterize as developable, potentially developable, and undevelopable. So this is where I think having maps that show that, you know, where those areas are would be incredibly helpful to the conversation, and we can incorporate those into this document. And we can define what the assessor defines as developable, because sometimes, you know, they could say something's potentially developable and it turns out it really isn't for some kind of environmental constraints that are on the site or the like. So there's sometimes some gray area when it comes to assessor's data and those characterizations, but I think this warrants a little bit more in-depth analysis for this section as well.
Stephen, I think you have your hand up. My screen is really tiny, so if you guys do, please just jump right in.
Oh, you're muted.
So sorry. Could you go back to your previous screen? And in light of the conversation we had about exempt and non-exempt, could you somehow put in there, because if you go up one more screen, such as the,
Oops, sorry. This one.
there you go, the Blanche James Elementary. That's education, but it's also tax exempt. So, and the group here knows that, but the people that may be looking at this later may not know that. And so if you could somehow or another add that to your schedule.
Okay. Sure, because there's this one too, the folk school renovation and expansion. So we can add that as part of this information as well. Okay. And then we close off at least what we've provided you for information on existing conditions with just a quick discussion of the historic commission's building demolition permit review bylaw, and talk about the purpose of that. And that is where we've gotten to date in terms of the existing conditions analysis. There is more information that we know we need to include, but we did want to get the committee something to review and digest. And I do think that a lot of the feedback will help us even as we create more content moving forward in terms of thinking a little bit deeper about what information we're putting in and why and what it means. So
So, a couple of things. We have local historic districts. And so there's that, it's called the Ames Local Historic District, which covers a portion of the Northeastern Village area. There's the Hayward Pool Local Historic District, which is on Foundry Street across where it intersects with Morse Road. And these districts are that you have here. And I'm just wondering if people would be confused. So the local historic districts are protected districts where any type of exterior alterations that can be viewed from a public way would be subject to a certificate of appropriateness review with the Historical Commission. I believe these are National Registered districts. I know Furnace Village is a National Registered district, and the Northeastern Historic District might also be National Registered District. So I just think it's important for those who know to make that distinction.
And we can also show maps on, map that out as well.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and Wayne Beitler in my office would be the person to work with on that.
okay.
Heather, I just have a couple other suggestions. I don't think I saw income in this. That might be a really important one to include, maybe nearer the housing section, or did I just miss it?
There, I
Or
might
maybe in
have
the
gone-
occupation section.
I'm sorry,
I
Joanne, I
have-
didn't hear your question.
Income, I was asking if
okay, yeah,
income was
mhm.
included. I feel like I might have missed it, or maybe it is here.
We have income right at the beginning. So I did
in the
not,
words, okay.
I'm sorry, I just jumped right into the tables and explaining that information and didn't go into the information we have here.
It might be helpful I think that's a really big part of a lot of conversations in Easton. It might be really helpful to see that as a graphic of some kind.
Okay.
And the other two that I know these aren't usually a traditional component, I guess, of a master plan, but I was just thinking about sort of poverty and health indicators and kind of a little bit more about like the social stuff in Easton. And I don't know if there's anything that you guys see in other community plans or often put in plans that might speak a little bit to that at all.
Jeff, I know that you worked with Athol on a component of their master plan update related to public health. Is there anything that you think we could pull to Joanne's point?
I definitely think there's going to be some data we can pull in, and I think then the discussion will become whether the town has any current activities related to that, or and do you want to include future oriented actions on some of those issues. That's kind of like a lot of this is call and response. So a lot of the information we put in at the end of the process will result in some kind of actions. So I think we can provide the data. I think that's pretty straightforward. And then I think just having a discussion about actions in the other community we were working in, they were very big on supporting public health as a municipal service. And they had several initiatives to kind of build up the relationship with service providers in the region to provide their population with additional, social services and that sort of thing. So I think it's something we can add in. I think maybe it's something where we, as a group, talk about having a question or, talk about that at the community meeting to find out, how people respond to that, how much of a priority does it pan out to be in terms of action items.
Yeah, and maybe it might be good to look at, I know the town it's older now, but it does have an age-friendly action plan and there's some statistics in there. But I was thinking things like in particular, the population suggests an aging population like we see in so many other places. But, how many people 60 plus are living alone? Emergency calls for, stuff like that. I think it's going to be a bigger issue in our community as we go on. So just kind of thinking about particularly sort of the 60 plus issues and mental health and all that other stuff that our town services are often really involved in.
So Joanne, I think you make an excellent point, and it really made me aware that Heather, and we can talk about this maybe tomorrow or over the next couple of days. I don't think as part of our stakeholder interviews, we met with the Director of Health and Community Services, which is a department that has really grown substantially in Easton. We had basically had a health department focused on your typical health department issues, Board of Health issues, septic repair, septic systems, communicable diseases, and food service. And then there was a recreation department, and veteran services were separated. Those were all merged together, and there are a lot of they brought a person on board that is a benefits and grants coordinator, but doing a lot more on helping people, as Joanne pointed out, and connecting to different services. There's I can't I know the college that they're working with, but there is a mental health referral program. Doesn't sound quite as robust as what Jeff was talking about, but it's really grown a lot and become a very important service within Easton. So we can talk about how we can get more information from them.
Okay.
And maybe the flip side of that too, not necessarily, but a little bit, is I don't know if it's worth mentioning school enrollment statistics in this opening chapter as well too. I think there's a lot of misconceptions around what those are and aren't.
And I think some of it depends on if there's data to source. So if the school department has that data readily available, I don't think we can produce that data uniquely. But if it's something that the school department has published, that could be a good talking point. And just going back on the health and community services, any kind of information, Stephanie, that you can help us dig out too, if they have an action plan, if they have a strategic plan, or any kind of documented approach to their work, that's a really great source document that I'm not aware that we saw that come through. In some cases,
Yep.
in some
I don't
cases,
know.
sorry.
No, sorry.
Okay. I was going to say, just as an example, in some cases, if those don't exist, like that would be the perfect action item, is to sort of recommend that the community services department creates that action plan and engages the community to come up with their forward-thinking plan over the next 10 years as to what they need, what they want, and what they need, if it doesn't already exist.
Yeah. So
That's all.
we can look at that. Wayne Beitler is on vacation this week, but I'll have him working with me to get that information.
We do have some of it. So I know from the school department standpoint, the information has been published on enrollment. And the strategic plan is posted on the school website as well. So you'd be able to see some of the information there as well. So you could pull that. I think we don't call it the Council on Aging, and the name is escaping me out what we do call, but I do believe there are a number of documents that they've posted as well in terms of community engagement and support that could be incorporated into this.
Chris, I see your hand up.
Yes, I was wondering, given that we have an aging population, is there somehow an ability to marry that with the income levels? Or is that just too much to ask for?
No, I think we could pull together a statistic that can identify that. I don't think that's too much to ask. I think we can do that.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Chris.
Sure. Maybe you said this, but I was going back to the document again. I know it says that Easton has an aging population. So maybe you mentioned this, but can we look at the overall services and then break down the percentage of service versus the demographics? Like how many of 100%, what's the percentage of services we have that are geared towards seniors versus geared towards families versus geared towards, children of, you know, whatever age. So at least we can get an understanding of where we potentially could be delinquent in over a period of time. So we can, looking at our master plan, to figure out how to target different areas of growth. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. My immediate thought would be to go through the budget and see what's allocated in the budget. But you'll have to give us a little time to digest and think about that one. Because I do think that would be helpful, especially for coming up with the action plan recommendations and, tracking that over time. I think that would be helpful to have. So
Right.
let us digest that a little bit.
Sure. Thank you.
So we don't have a report or any kind of summary drafted for trends yet. Jeff has been doing a little bit of background work into that, and going to give him the opportunity to throw out some thoughts to you guys today. But that will be something that we'll be able to have in a much better place after we do this first community meeting. So a lot of the discussion that we have at that meeting will help us to really kind of form those themes as well.
You want me to speak to that now?
Yes, I'm going to stop sharing now.
I think it'll be brief. I'm not going to share my screen or anything, but we were looking back at the 2014 plan, and it really contained two overarching themes, which were generally called sustainability and communication and connectivity. There were kind of these two buckets of themes that came through in 2014. And they kind of broke it down into some subcategories. It was environmental sustainability, economic sustainability, and community sustainability. And that was 2014. And as we, are involved in your community and you guys are hearing everything about sort of financial sustainability, it's close to being a little cliche, but it is really sort of a buzzword, but I think it has many applications. And so as we start to kind of shift, from 2014 to like through today, we are looking at kind of continuing this theme of sustainability for the 2025 master plan. And I'm just trying to read through some of my notes, but I think there's a through line with things like housing, economic development, um, financial stability, and climate resiliency. So all of those topics have this sustainability theme that are running through the trends that we're seeing for Easton, and then this the pace effort and the override vote, that word sustainability is just repeated very consistently. And so I think we're going to propose that we kind of carry that theme through this plan. And an important thing that this is what we're working on now is with the PACE program. They really outlined this community compact. They outlined this commitment to the community where moving forward, they're gonna, be having these guiding principles for the town. And they talk about land use and infrastructure as one of the guiding principles that's coming out of the PACE program. Minimizing the impacts on seniors and veterans and individuals with disabilities. And then kind of this budgetary kind of area, which includes sort of bond rating and things like that. But that's kind of the financial theme that we're seeing, where it's going to actually drive conversations about land use and infrastructure. And so where we're going with this is kind of creating this outline where we have a discussion about housing. We started to scratch the surface with this existing conditions. You have a housing production plan. The town has goals to produce, affordable housing and market rate housing, but it really needs to be done in this sustainable way. and it's kind of targeting, certain areas where development would be appropriate, kind of that sustainability mode. I have some more notes here, but I'm not prepared to go through them. But the Affordable Housing Trust, has an action plan. So we're starting to build out this housing chapter kind of aimed at sustainability. And that can cover a lot of different populations. And I think what Chris was saying about the aging population, and how do we incorporate housing for this aging cohort that we have. And then economic development sustainability, really looking at all the studies, and I think we have a graphic to put together for all the planning efforts that the town has done over time. This notion of the commercial districts, the sewer infrastructure projects, and all these areas that have been identified, create this sustainability discussion where the town would want to focus development activity where these areas already have been developed, and so that kind of has that sustainability piece. And then just the last one for tonight is really climate, and so sort of the word doesn't exactly fit climate sustainability. The terminology most of the time right now is resiliency, but the process that the town is undergoing with the climate action plan talks about sustainability in a bunch of different topical areas. And so where we see, sorry if I'm getting this, I am looking at the timeline that Heather put up, and I'm looking at my notes here. There's relationship to transportation and land use all throughout climate as well. So we think with this kind of trend and these themes, we can touch on most of the subjects. There will be a few that I think fall a little bit outside of a sustainability theme. And so we might have sort of this ending catch-all kind of place where we put other, topics or actions that the town is going to need to pursue in terms of a trend. So we were sort of a work in progress on that. What we were doing as part of our research is the timeline that's up has clickable links. So we looked back to 2010. There were some important activities with the sewer district that started it probably started before 2010, but 2010 was really this beginning point of the sewer infrastructure projects, and we just went through all of the planning efforts that the town has done in these past sort of 14 years, put them on the timeline. We have a general description of each of them, and we would plan to use the timeline in the master plan as a way to provide links, clickable links for people. So they're accessing this plan, they can quickly access, all of this information that's available for the variety of topics. And this is the way that we're seeing these comprehensive plans kind of be easier to read. So rather than having pages and pages and pages of all these plans and information, we're trying to become more concise and make it user friendly. And so I don't know, Heather, if you want to talk about the timeline at this point, but that's kind of some of the trends and themes that we're seeing. And we just wanted to have this opportunity to show you the existing conditions. And then, as we talk about the community meeting in June, I think our goal would be to provide all this quickly and at a high level for the residents, and then engage them in discussion. So we won't be going through, labor intensive statistics at the community meeting, but they'll be generally available. So I think with that, Heather, I'll stop. And if you want to talk about the time.
So Jeff, before you
Yeah.
transition
Sure.
to Heather, just 2 points on the older population.
Sure.
One is, it would be nice to know, because I would think the older population still lives in the houses that they own, right? So they may not want to go to another house, right? Within Easton, they may want to keep their house. So what is the feasibility of them sustaining their house at a lower tax rate or something like that? I don't know if that's in your numbers, so that would be in the master plan. The other thing is, if they're aging in Easton, there's really no place for them to go and get exercise, right? I mean, YMCA, they can't get out and walk like Stoughton Y, et cetera. So I would think some of those factors we need to figure out as well. Like, if you're gonna sustain them in Easton, you have to make it so that not only do they have open walking space outside, but where can they go when it's cold in those remote months where they can sustain as well? And then, do they want to give up their houses, right? Some of them may want to stay in the houses that they are in versus, selling that house and going into rental property. So we probably need to understand that number, right, as far as our plan, because our number is higher than the state average.
Yep, I think that makes sense. And some of it will come out of that age-friendly action plan. And some of it will be most likely action items that the town will need to continue to pursue over time if they don't exist. If these plans or the discussion doesn't exist, that would be what we put in the action plan for the town to pursue. But that's helpful information. I see, Stephen, is it about my
Yes.
rambling trend conversation?
Yes, I'd just like to second a lot of what Chris just said. We have an aging population. So in this master plan, what are we recommending that the town do for this aging population? And some are going to be okay, but some of them will be in need of help. And so I'm just asking that master plan include something along those same lines. Thank you.
And I just to really hammer that in the third person, I think sometimes in a master plan, there's so much focus on infrastructure and stuff that's built or not built and where it's built and that sort of stuff. I think it's so important to have a lot of these sort of social issues incorporated into the plan, to make sure that, yeah, the schools are always a big topic of discussion, but the aging population, the veterans, we have a food pantry that takes in a lot of people. I think that stuff is so important when we talk about these things. It's almost like the infrastructure is for the people, right? So I think it's important to kind of make sure that we provide the information to make that connection.
I think that this is, it goes, kind of ties back to, in a way, the kind of the income and looking at the spread of incomes, because I would guess that there is, Easton has, in the time I've worked with the town, and it had begun before that, become a more affluent community. At the same time, you have a lot of residents that have spent their entire lives here. And many of them are aging. Some of them are a little more, just on the aging side of the middle. But housing, Chris makes a point that someone has a house. Well, a lot of cases, I think you have people who want to downsize. And while they may get a lot of value for their home selling it, then they'd have to buy something smaller. And those homes aren't necessarily or even affordable in Easton or exist. So there's a discrepancy there or a gap for a need that's not being met.
Yeah, I think it's a common theme.
Yeah.
There's no silver bullet, but I think like making recommendations to continue to provide a mix of housing types, and diversify, future housing growth so that the housing continuum for people who start with a rental, get into a home, and then want to downsize again, having the types of houses, homes for each of those needs. I think that's a really good goal. I think a housing production plan talks about, I think that's one of the gaps that we continue to see, Heather, if this is okay. Housing production plans really focus on affordable housing with a capital A and create a lot of action items for a town to focus on that. But there's a whole nother set of housing types that, don't get covered in the housing production plans. And, the town, we may need to recommend that the town continue to pursue other housing strategies, and those would be additional action items that the town would take over the next 10 years.
Right, and they have to be actions that the town can, actually is able to implement. And
Sure. Yep.
you just can't tell developers you're going to build affordable housing that meets the working class, the needs of working class people, lower middle income, where the stock is just not existent. But what are your zoning strategies that could
Right.
support that type of development and make it worthwhile for developers to build smaller homes in smaller houses.
Yeah,
And
I agree
it's
100%, the
like
zoning
you get-
strategies, and then the market has to be able to support that too, so the developers,
Right.
you know, there's that market demand that has to be there as well, but you set the stage by making sure the zoning allows that variety. So yeah, I'm taking those notes. That makes a lot of sense to us, so. Heather, do you want to talk about the timeline at all, or?
Sorry, before I just,
Oh, yep.
Stephanie, Nikki has asked if you could promote her other person. It's in the chat.
Is that, okay, so wait a minute. Oh, Melissa has, sorry. And Nikki, okay.
Sorry, I don't want to be too
I've been
disruptive.
watching that for a while and then, and in fact, I was looking for Melissa. I was looking at my email to see if she was there. All right, Nikki, you should be coming in. All right, there we are. Thank you.
Sorry, Heather, back to you.
All right, so we just wanted to show this timeline. As Jeff said, it is town-related initiatives, more than it is the development that we showed in the existing conditions document. So we thought this was a really useful way to show that there's been a lot that's been done. You know, over 15 years, 10 years, I can't do math, I'm sorry. So the links are clickable and it will bring you to the information if you're interested in finding out more. And this will be sent along for your review. And Stephanie just received this as well. So it is a work in progress. It is very much a draft and it could end up having more information added to it, but we wanted to show that we did create something that we are going to put into the document as a way to track progress over time. I'm going to stop sharing that. And that's what we have for the information that was on the agenda. If I may, we would like to take a few minutes just to talk about what to expect for the next meeting. I don't know if there's other agenda items that need to be discussed or anything like that, so.
No, I think the next meeting and then I think that's where we're going to be talking. I'm trying to look at my calendar more about the upcoming public session.
Correct.
Is that?
Yes. I think we're
Yes.
talking about June 18 at 6 p.m. as our next meeting.
Correct. Yes. And in that meeting, we have an overview of what well, I'll just share my screen again because it's easier and then you'll understand what I'm talking about. This is an outline and we want to talk about the agenda for the meeting, how we'll proceed with it. We are looking at doing a presentation, broad level of what we've done to date, the work we've done to date. And then we want to break out into small group facilitated discussions. So we will use the June 18th meeting to prep for that because we are going to need this committee's help with those discussions. BSC will have several staff in the room to help with the small groups, and depending on how many people come out will depend on how big or small the groups are. We don't like to go much beyond maybe 8 people per group, but we do like to have one of our planners team with somebody from the committee that we're working with. So we would hope that you'd be able to help with us in terms of the conversation and the discussion and the questions and all of that happens. When we do the facilitated small group discussions, we do like to have a note taker and a reporter. So we will ask people who are in the room in the groups to volunteer for that. And if nobody volunteers, then one of us will take that on as the group that we're working with to either report back or take notes or do both or whatever. But that's typically how we kind of structure that. And so we just wanted to run through that a little bit, give you a little preview as to what we're going to be talking about at the next meeting. What I would ask is if, and I'm going to jump back to the conversation we had today and the information we reviewed today. We've taken notes. We have this video we can refer back to if we need to. And if there's anything that you think about where you get off the call and over the next couple of days, something just jumps in your head and you're like, oh, that would be really helpful for us to have in that report, or is that something that you're planning on putting into it? If you reach out to Stephanie, I think as the point of contact, Stephanie can then shoot it over to us so that we can be aware of it and make sure we're putting it in. Other than that, I don't know if there's any questions about the meeting that we're going to have on June 18th, but that was what we were planning on, just having kind of the facilitation guide to run through with the group and talk about the different questions that we're asking and why and all of that. Jeff, do you have anything you want to add?
No, that was really good. I think just talking really briefly about at June 18th, we have an outreach at some point prior to the meeting. So we have the community meeting for June 24th, right? That's what we're aiming for.
Correct.
And so we have the town meeting voted to send it to the election, and so we have the election, and then we do outreach. And so it'll be kind of a fast sort of couple weeks where we start the outreach. We have a meeting with this committee on the 18th, and we'll have questions like Heather said. We'll have the questions to talk through, and then we'll have the meeting on the 24th.
Yeah. I would like to say, so everybody, at least on our side, I believe knows June 10th is the vote. As kind of as soon as that's over, we can go public with the outreach for the meeting on the 24th. In the meantime, I would tell people, if you're talking to someone and talking about your participation on the committee and the master plan, you can mention that there's going to be a public engagement session on the 24th. It's going to be at Frothingham Hall. So again, on kind of a quiet little wave will build up to the formal public outreach.
And we have drafted some flyers that we are going to, and we'll have like a social media posts and that kind of information. But these are in the works as well. So.
Okay. Stephanie, do you have
Can you
anything to-
email
oh,
that flyer? Sorry. Can you
Nope,
email
go
that
ahead.
flyer to Stephanie and distribute it to us, and we can put it on our social media or whatever?
I will let Stephanie decide when the right time is to get that.
Yeah,
to you
we're
guys.
not going to go broadly out on social media until the 10th.
Sure.
What I will do is, if Heather sends it to me, I will email it to all of you on a delayed delivery. So it hits you on the either late afternoon or on Sunday the 11th. And then you'll have it handy. What I was talking about, kind of the quiet, like I was talking with someone the other day and they were asking about the master plan committee and what was going on. I gave them a little update, and then I just let them know that there'd be a public engagement session on the 24th.
Anybody else have any questions or comments for BSC? No. Stephanie, do you have anything to add, or Heather?
I don't. Again, I want to kind of echo what I said at the beginning. BSC stayed engaged and continued to work on the project, but the fact that so many of the committee members are participating tonight and have continued to participate is really encouraging and greatly appreciated. This, it was a little discouraging as staff that we had to have this interruption, but the fact that you're still here and really actively participating in the process and asking really good questions and giving good feedback is just critical to making this a success. So thank you.
All right, thanks everyone. So that's it for the agenda. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion.
Okay, I think that was Chris. Do I have a second?
Percio, second.
Great. All in favor? Tana? You're muted.
Yes, yeah, sorry, I didn't want to
That's all right.
unmute.
No problem. Stephen?
Yes.
Sahara?
Yep. Yes.
Kelly?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Nikki?
Yes.
And Melissa? Melissa, we can't hear you. It looks like you unmuted, but we can't hear you.
Yes. Now?
There we go. Yep,
right.
good now.
Okay. All right.
Awesome.
Yes.
And just
Cool.
one
All
thing,
right.
Melissa, you
Yep.
can we can send you a recording of the meeting too,
Yes.
so that you can see what you missed.
Please. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Great. And Joanna's a yes. So that does it. Thanks everyone. Have a good night.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Thank you.
Night.